All right, let's jump right in. We're talking about biogeography today. It's the science that asks a pretty simple question with a mind-blowingly complex answer. Where is life on Earth? And more importantly, why is it there? Believe me, this is a story that unfolds across millions of years and entire continents. I mean, have you ever really thought about it? Why kangaroos in Australia? Why are lemurs kicking back only in Madagascar? It feels random, right? But it's not. Not at all. There are very specific reasons for this, and they make up one of the greatest puzzles in all of biology. And the answer? Well, it's like a giant detective story. To solve it, we have to look for clues buried in the deep past, clues hidden in today's environment, and clues in the very DNA of these creatures. That, right there, is the whole game of biogeography. Okay, so before we can crack the case, we first need to understand the questions the detectives, the biogeographers, are asking. These are the big ones that drive the entire field. It all kind of boils down to this. First, what is it about a place that lets a species call it home? Second, what's stopping them from just taking over the world? What are the invisible barriers? Then you have to ask, how did huge events from the past, like ice ages or continents literally drifting apart, draw the lines on the map we see today? And finally, the big one. Why is there just so much more life crammed into the tropics compared to anywhere else? So, to answer all that, the investigation splits into two major teams. You've got the historical biogeographers, they're like the cold case detectives, looking at clues from the deep past, evolution, continental drift, ancient climates. Then you've got the ecological biogeographers. They're the ones on the ground, investigating the here and now. What's happening today that decides who lives where? You absolutely need both to get the full story. Let's start with the history team, because really, to get a grip on the present, you have to rewind the clock and see how our own ideas about this stuff have changed over time. It's a pretty cool journey. If you go way back to the 1700s, people like Linnaeus thought everything was pretty much fixed. He pictured all the animals spreading out from a single mountain after the Great Flood. But then a guy named Buffon came along and noticed something weird. He saw that places with super similar climates, say a rainforest in Africa and one in South America, had totally different animals. This became known as Buffon's Law, and it was a huge crack in the old way of thinking. It hinted that species, and maybe even the climate itself, could change. And that, of course, paved the way for the heavy hitters, Darwin and Wallace, who finally gave us the how, evolution by natural selection. And don't think for a second this was just a side project for them. Darwin himself called this whole question, the geographic distribution of life, the keystone of the laws of creation. He knew that figuring out where things live was fundamental to understanding how they came to be in the first place. But here's the twist. It wasn't just the animals that were changing. The entire planet was on the move. And the last absolutely massive piece of this historical puzzle didn't snap into place until the 1960s with the acceptance of plate tectonics. All of a sudden, we understood that continents weren't static. They were drifting, colliding, and ripping apart, carrying their unique collections of life with them like giant rasts. Okay, so let's hit pause on the past and fast forward to today. We've got our historical backdrop. Now let's look at the modern day rules of the road, the rules of survival. This is where ecology comes in. And the main stage for all this action is the ecosystem. Now, an ecosystem isn't just the collection of living things, the plants, the animals, the fungi, what we call the biotic factors. It's also how they all interact with the non-living stuff, the abiotic factors, like the sunlight, the water, the rocks, the air. It's all connected. And what powers this whole operation? Energy. And pretty much all of it starts with the sun. You can think of it like a one-way street. Energy flows from the sun, gets captured by producers, that's plants mostly, and then it gets passed up the line to all the consumers who eat them. Nutrients, on the other hand, get recycled over and over, but that constant flow of energy from the sun is what keeps the whole show running. The easiest way to picture this flow of energy is a simple food chain, right? The grass is the producer, the grasshopper that eats the grass is the primary consumer, the snake that eats the grasshopper is the secondary consumer, and on it goes up the chain. But let's be real, nature is never that simple, is it? In the real world, it's not a single chain, it's a huge, tangled food web. That snake doesn't just eat grasshoppers, and hawks don't just eat snakes. This messiness, this complexity, is actually what makes an ecosystem strong and stable. If one food source has a bad year, there are other pathways in the web to keep things from falling apart. Okay, so we've gathered the clues from the past, and we've learned the rules of the present. Now it's time to put it all together, finally solve our puzzle, and see the grand blueprint of life on Earth. And here's the answer. Where any given species lives comes down to a combination of three major things. First, its evolutionary history. Who were its ancestors? Second, its dispersal history. Basically, how did it get there? Was it on a continent that broke away? Did it fly? Did it float? And third, can it actually survive there now? Does it have the right food, the right climate, and can it handle the competition? Past, journey, and present. That's the formula. Now, with millions of species all following these rules, things can get complicated fast. So to keep it all straight, scientists use a system, the taxonomic hierarchy. It's basically a giant organizational chart for all of life, classifying everything from the huge, broad kingdoms all the way down to a single specific species. Think of it like a family tree for every living thing, helping us track all the players in this global story. Which brings us right back to our kangaroo. So why Australia, and only Australia? Well, because its ancient marsupial ancestors were already on that piece of land when it broke off from the other continents millions of years ago. From that point on, they evolved in total isolation, perfectly adapting to Australia's unique ecosystems and filling jobs that are handled by other kinds of mammals on other continents. So the big takeaway here is that the map of life is not a static picture. It's a movie that's still being filmed. The continents are still inching along, climates are shifting, and species are constantly adapting and moving. And that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. If everything is always changing, what on earth will the map of life look like a million years from now?